Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, but before that, just a quick reminder to please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers and every single click counts. And today's deck is going to be centered around Arabella, Abandoned Doll. For 1 red and 1 white, it's a legendary artifact creature toy 1/3 with whenever Arabella, Abandoned Doll attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. So as soon as I saw this card in the spoiler for the set, I thought that it was super strong, and that comes down to a couple of things, and the main one is the wording. We've talked before in cards like Brazen Cannonade, which is in this deck by the way, about how the slightest wording change in a card can make or break it. The life gain does not triple with your opponents, but it does deal damage to each opponent, and that is huge. That means that this can dish out an absolute boatload of damage on each attack, and it's doing it to each opponent at the same time. That's kind of crucial because aggro decks in Commander really struggle with dealing damage to everybody. They kind of tend to have to pick up one player at a time, which makes them very vulnerable and makes it very difficult for you to close out the game. With Arabella, however, you can dish out tons of damage to all of your opponents at the same time, thus making it very easy for you to close out the game. So we've got a bunch of ways to make her unblockable, and obviously we're running a bunch of creatures with power 2 or less, and this just seems like a very powerful list. So without further ado, let's dive right in. And we're starting off with Adeline, Resplendent Cathar. This is obviously fantastic in the deck. She herself is not going to work too well with Arabella since she's almost always going to have higher power, but the fact that you can get up to 3/1/1s every turn that are going to trigger your Arabella makes it very, very solid. Animpakal Thousand Moon is really good with our commander. She's going to come down, we're going to attack, and we're going to immediately get a token which is going to make Arabella deal more damage, and then it just gets better and better from there. Very solid. Daxos Blessed by the Sun can brawl very nicely thanks to the fact that it's going to have high toughness. It's also going to gain us a nice little bit of life while also triggering our commander. Burgar Hedge Mage is really solid as a way to interact with our opponent's things. It should almost always be turned on here, and getting a 3/1 with our cards is just sensational. Enduring Innocence is very powerful in this deck. Almost our entire deck is going to trigger it, and it's very hard to remove. This is a great source of repeatable card advantage in the deck. Fear of Missing Out is perfect in this deck once we have Delirium active, which this helps facilitate. At that point, Arabella is going to get to attack twice. We don't care that our other creatures aren't untapping since she's the only one we really want to attack with. Goblin Rabblemaster is great. It triggers Arabella by itself, but we're going to also get another goblin every single turn. If our opponents are lacking in blockers, this can be very powerful, but even if they're not, it's just another way to trigger our commander. Next up is Irreverent Gremlin, and this is really solid because it has evasion all by itself, but also it's going to constantly filter through our deck whenever we get small creatures in play. That works very nicely with a lot of stuff that we're doing, and we do have a couple of cards to care about Delirium and the Graveyard. Living Fawn is really good in this deck. Its death trigger is going to automatically replace itself with more gas, which is exactly what we want. O'Shield Clockwork Scholar works very nicely with the large amount of artifact creatures we've got in the deck, and also, of course, it protects Arabella from taking damage when she attacks. Very solid. Loyal Apprentice is going to give us a steady stream of evasive creatures that all trigger our commander. Mirror Entity is a great finisher. We can wait till after we've triggered Arabella on attack and then pump all of our team to deal massive amounts of damage. Mog War Marshal works really nicely by guaranteeing 3 bodies that trigger our commander in one package. Altec Matter Weaver is really solid in this deck, seeing as the tokens all work very well with our commander. Phoenix Chick is solid. It triggers our commander and it can come back over and over, and is very likely to do so in a deck with this many small creatures. Pia and Kira Nalar gives us 3 bodies for our commander for 4 mana. That would already be good, but being able to sacrifice our artifacts to deal damage is also very solid. Piggy Bank gives us a decent body that dies into a treasure. This is one of the cards you could consider cutting if you have something better in your collection. Ragged Playmate, on the other hand, is very solid by making Arabella unblockable. This can be very, very powerful. Reckless Pyro Surfer can be a good way to finish the game, seeing as it gaining Battlecry means that it can pump our entire team when it attacks. Revelark is a classic in Commander, and it's very good in a deck with this many creatures with power 2 or less. Rumor Gatherer is going to be pulling so much work in this deck with all the small creatures we're running. Sanguine Evangelist is really good because it comes with 3 bodies guaranteed, and then having Battlecry means that it's going to give a lot more damage to our team. Saradoc Master of Buckland gives us a lot of extra bodies to trigger our commander with, and then it can also pump itself up after attack to gain a little bit of life. Search Party Captain should almost always come down for 1 or 2 mana and immediately replace itself. Spirited Companion also immediately replaces itself for nice value. Blitzskin Doll should almost certainly replace itself in this deck with all of the small creatures we're running. Subira Tulzidi Caravanseer works very nicely by making our commander unblockable, and then we can also discard our hand if we think we're going to be able to get through with a bunch of creatures to draw a ton of cards. Sun Titan works nicely with most of our deck, which is very cheap and can reanimate those cards that we're discarding. The Jolly Balloon Balloon Man is pretty decent with some of the cards in the deck that have ETBs and death triggers. The Yoshino Heretic is a great way to deal with our opponent's artifacts while also clocking them for some damage. Weathered Wayfarer should help us keep up on lands, seeing as we're barely running any ramp in this deck. And Welcoming Vampire is yet another way to draw cards, which is going to trigger a lot in our deck. Moving on to sorceries, we have Clowning Around. If we get lucky with the dice roll, this is one of the best rates we can get for 3 creatures. Glimpse the Impossible can also be guaranteed 3 creatures or give us some card advantage, and we get to choose after seeing the cards that we exile, so this is really nice. Hodling Outburst is 3 bodies for 3 mana. You can't really beat that rate for the most part. Round 2 works really well with our commander. We only need to untap her, so being able to get another attack off of her is just so good. Split Up should be very solid in this deck because we're going quite aggressive, so we don't really care that much about destroying all untapped creatures. Also, if for whatever reason we're on the defensive, this can just be a massive blowout. Tempt with Bunnies is really cute and quite solid in this deck. Our opponents are probably not going to want to give us too many 1/1s, but if they do, we get to draw more cards and make more 1/1s. For instance, Boros Charm, Flare of Fortitude, and Flawless Maneuver are all really good protection spells in this deck, seeing as we are a very much board-based deck. Call the Copper Coats can be insane when we have a bunch of mana and play it at the end of turn to just get a huge army and win with our commander. Great Train Heist gives us an extra combat step at instant speed. That is incredibly powerful, and I've been very impressed with this card whenever I've played it. And Thraben Charm is very solid in the deck. We're running a lot of creatures, so this becomes a very efficient removal spell that can deal with 3 different problems. For artifacts, Genesis Chamber is incredibly solid in this deck, effectively doubling the amount of creatures we get to trigger our commander. Key to the City is a great way to get Arabella through and can also allow us to draw some cards. Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots are there to protect her and make sure she can attack immediately. Mixstone is incredibly good in a deck like this because all of our creatures are really small, but our opponent's big creatures won't be able to attack. And Skull Clamp can allow us to draw some cards by tacking it onto our small creatures. Moving on to enchantments, Blessed Sanctuary fits perfectly because it's going to stop our commander from taking damage, and then also it's going to provide us extra bodies whenever we get a non-token creature. Brazen Cannonade can deal a ton of damage and make it very difficult to block our creatures when our opponents are low. City on Fire is insanely good, particularly when we can tap all of our little tokens, and they're still going to trigger Arabella when she attacks. Dollmaker's Shop is there mostly for the front side, seeing as this second side has a little bit of a number with Arabella, so it's best not to use it unless we're winning the game. But that being said, getting a steady stream of 1/1s is really good. Reconnaissance is really good because it works very nicely with our commander, but it also means that most of our creatures cannot be killed when attacking. The Restoration of a Ganjo gives us some really nice value and then transforms into a creature that can provide bodies for our commander over and over. Takacia's Welcome is yet another way for us to draw cards when small creatures enter the battlefield. And finally, moving on to lands, we have Access Tunnel and Rogue's Passage, which are great ways to get our commander through. Kirkkeep and Sokensen can provide us some nice bodies to make it so that we can keep triggering our commander for high numbers, and War Room is just a way to draw some cards if we start to run out of gas. So there you have it. That has been my Arabella Abandoned Doll deck tech. What do you think about this one? I'm quite excited to put it together and see if it's as powerful of an aggressive deck as I think it might be. But what do you think? Are there any cards you think I missed? Any cards I shouldn't have included? Let me know in the comment section below. I always make sure to read all of your comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.